The Council of 11, oldest coalition of stellar power, had sensed war long before it was declared. In the galaxies they governed, conflict wasn't a matter of if, but how devastating. Empires toppled with whispers, planets vanished over trade disputes, and now, Earth was the variable. A world once insignificant, scarred by its own chaos, barely recovered from climate collapse and internal division, Earth had become quiet, too quiet. No fleets, no public threats, no open diplomacy, just silence. And silence, in council terms, was either surrender or something worse. A minor border dispute had triggered it. A mining satellite claimed by Earth was seized by a consortium patrol. When Earth filed no complaint, issued no protest, and summoned no aid, the Council assumed weakness. So they escalated. But Earth still said nothing. Instead, something stranger happened. Terran communication nodes darkened. Civilian channels ceased. Military traffic vanished. Observers saw no ships mobilizing. No protests. No warnings. Only one broadcast remained across all Terran satellites. "We're not preparing for war. We're preparing for the funeral." The Council laughed. At first, until the disappearances began. Not violent, not explosive. Just, gone. A patrol cruiser stationed near the Sol Gate? Silent. A diplomat en route to Earth's moon? Never arrived. Every drone sent into Terran orbit returned, scrambled. Some sang. And then the funeral started. Not Earth's, theirs. It began with a hush, not absence but compression. From orbit, Earth glowed as always. Cities lit like neural networks pulsing under clouds. Power grids ran. Transport hubs cycled. Satellites stayed on path. From the stars, everything appeared functional, yet the planet had gone quiet. No broadcasts, no music, no emergency beacons, no static. Silence. The Galactic Council's first assumption was equipment failure. The Carthan array had a known flaw in its human spectrum filters. They sent drones. 5, then 50, then 112. All returned intact. All confirmed the same. Earth was not offline. Earth was mute. Inside council chambers, speculation brewed. Could they have wiped themselves out? Asked Chancellor Vilne of the Muric Dominion, her frilled crest twitching. No signs of conflict, responded Admiral Jigsaw of the Saranth Armada. No impact craters. No radiation spikes. Their oceans are clean. Their skies show signs of reform. "They're not dead," said a voice from the back. Old, slow, considered, high archivist Daylor. "They're planning." Murmurs flickered like wind through dry grass. The surveillance footage confirmed his suspicion. In every major Terran city, humans were moving, in coordinated groups. Tens of thousands crossing bridges, walking highways, descending into subways in ordered silence. No spoken commands, no chaos, just movement. The footage was mesmerizing, creepy, even to species unfamiliar with Earth's behavioral norms. They built structures, monuments, machines, but none of it broadcasted signal or showed weapons arrays. One drone flew low enough to scan the faces of a crowd in Shanghai. Eyes open, breathing steady. Every person turned to look directly into the camera, then waved, perfectly synchronized. The drone crashed 2 seconds later. No damage, no heat signature, no reason. It simply stopped functioning. The council met again. Urgent session, attendance mandatory. Their conclusions were cautious, diluted through centuries of politics and fear of cultural overreach. Proposal: humanity is undergoing a mass psychogenic shift. Translation: they've gone crazy. But deep within the chamber, a few weren't convinced. The Vrixian diplomat, known for her scent-based logic trees, issued a private report. Pattern consistency across global behaviors at scale suggests intention, not collapse. She was ignored. 3 days later, the southern pole of Earth shimmered, not physically but digitally. Every council sensor registered a temporal spike centered over Antarctica. When probed, the region displayed only tundra, but drones sent into the airspace lost feed exactly 7 minutes and 46 seconds after entry. not destroyed, not jammed, simply overwritten. The feed repeated itself, the same loop over and over. That loop, a sunrise, nothing more. But the sun rose wrong, too fast, then too slow. Some analysts claimed it was a data loop glitch. Others swore the sun blinked. The Council's Science Corps declared it an error. The diplomats agreed. Errors were comforting. Then came the second signal, not from Earth, but from Mars. A relay long thought defunct, buried under Martian dust for over a century, came online. Its message was 3 words, encrypted in a cipher known only to early human deep space missions. "We are listening." No further signal followed. The drone near Mars burned out a second later, emitting no heat. Its internal memory dissolved into white noise. And Earth, still silent, still pulsing with that slow, eerie choreography. Children drawing identical spiral patterns in schoolyards, elderly forming concentric circles in parks, workers raising towers with no known purpose, all in dead quiet. They were building something, preparing something, and doing it together, as one species, as if responding to a signal no one else could hear. The final note in the Council's internal memorandum said it plainly. Humanity is not broken. They are becoming. Panic did not set in. Not yet. The Council's doctrine was built on observation before interference. And Earth, after all, had always been strange, but now it was unnerving. An analyst from the Kirathi Concordat tried to map the patterns of human movement, assigning behavioral models. After 47 hours without rest, she submitted a single line of code and collapsed. "They are simulating response." Her team accessed the line. It was not a model. It was a mirror. Every known Council species, their aggression cycles, their panic behaviors, their military mobilization paths, all mapped within Earth's silent actions. As if humanity wasn't reacting to the galaxy, they were rehearsing for it. The Grand Speaker of the Noric Triad proposed a Class 3 quarantine. Earth was to be isolated, no signals in, none out. But isolation was already happening. Human digital infrastructure, untouched by outside interference, began retracting. Satellites shut down. Internet nodes fell silent. Old radio towers, ancient by their standards, powered up instead, broadcasting nothing except a low, constant hum, imperceptible to most known species. But to Terran frequencies, it was a chord, musical, measured, deliberate. The Council was at a loss. There was no precedent for a civilization this coordinated in silence. No faction, no leaders, no demands, no sign of distress, just calm, unnatural calm. The final vote in the emergency session was split. Half believed Earth was on the edge of breakdown. The other half feared it was on the edge of something worse, awakening. The last recorded drone, before blackout protocol was enacted, caught a single image before its data collapsed. A boy standing in an open field. He held up a sign to the sky. 3 words painted in red, "We remember you." Then the feed went black. Earth remained silent. And for the first time in galactic history, so did the Council. The consortium was not afraid. Unlike the Council, they did not deliberate over shadows or silence. They responded with data, with tech, with cold logic. So they sent probes, not military craft, stealth arrays, woven with spectral cloaking and multi-layered language suppressors, designed to observe, not influence. They entered Earth's orbit on a whisper, and within minutes, something whispered back. The first probe, CR9, drifted above what once was France. Its auditory logs, encrypted across 12 dimensions, began broadcasting Earth lullabies in languages no longer known to any human. Proto-Norse, pre-dynastic Egyptian, Ainu dialects lost before the Bronze Age. No signal had triggered this. No command had requested it. And yet the probes sang. Across every consortium receiver, the feed looped. Soft, human, melodic. Terran cradle songs, gentle, loving, devastating. Several operators cried without understanding why. The log was terminated. The probe self-disabled. But not before one final transmission blinked through. "We remember our beginnings." It was dismissed. Coincidence, surely. Audio bleed. A neural backwash from Earth's legacy systems. A second probe followed, more advanced. Encased in Terran-immune alloys, psi-shielded, it made it over the equator before its core began to liquefy. No external heat, no intrusion. The system simply melted, one command at a time. Its last transmission was not a voice. It was light. Flashes of raw code patterns, an ancient Terran emergency cipher used during planetary catastrophes. 3 words: do not interfere with remembrance. The Council reviewed the data. Some dismissed it as anomaly, others myth. Mimetic weaponry is theoretical, argued the Serenth delegate. Emotion-triggered defense systems are a fantasy. Earth is posturing. But not everyone agreed. High Archivist Daylor, now seldom seen in chamber sessions, whispered his opinion into sealed transcript. They are not defending. They are remembering so loudly it defends them. The phrase became a quiet virus in the halls of debate. And still, Earth said nothing. No retaliation, no message. Just silence filled with echoes that weren't supposed to exist. Probe 3 vanished. Not destroyed. Not disabled. It simply ceased to be. No wreckage. No final ping. Its launch partner, Probe 4, returned early, without instructions. It descended from orbit, entered controlled drift, and landed in a shallow sea on Retha's moon. When recovered, its surface was etched, not by heat or tool, but memory. Thousands of human fingerprints burned into its shell. Impossible, but real. Analysis confirmed every print belonged to a historical figure long dead. Scientists called it imprint hallucination. Philosophers called it a reply. After that, no more probes were sent. The risk was not physical loss. It was informational collapse. Operators who had reviewed Earth's signals reported dreams, reciting human poetry in languages they never learned, weeping over ancestors they never had, hearing voices in static, calling them child. Some broke protocol and tried to answer. Those who did fell silent for days, staring at stars that no longer matched galactic charts. Astronavigation had to be recalibrated, not because Earth moved, but because the galaxy had. In private chambers, a term emerged: mimetic bleed. It was not official. It had no quantifiable metric, but everyone began using it. Something about Earth had become informationally active, not through signal, but sentiment, through memory. And memory, the Council realized too late, could not be quarantined. The lullabies weren't just lullabies. They were mnemonic payloads, nostalgia engineered as contagion. Probe 5 was launched with neural firewalls. It returned with a simple message carved into its hull in childlike English. We're practicing silence. Can you? A debate followed. Was it threat, invitation, test? The probe's audio logs told a different story. No signals, just breathing. Not mechanical, not atmospheric. Human breath, in, outside, 12 hours of it. Operators listening to the feed began matching its rhythm involuntarily. Heart rates changed. One entered a meditative trance and never came out. Psych surgeons reported his neural activity resembled pre-language infants, wide open, absorbing everything. And in the core of his hippocampus, a music box melody, unidentified, looping without source. Council lockdown began. All Earth-related data was classified. Mimetic quarantine activated. Still, the whispers spread. Songs heard in dream space. Walls humming forgotten Terran instruments. Maps redrawing themselves overnight with older, rounder Earth glyphs. One by one, systems touched by the probes began experiencing memory drift. Not loss, reassignment. The past was bending, making room. In the museum world of Axivar, a holographic display of ancient Terran artifacts began updating itself. No AI was assigned to it. A stone tool previously tagged Neolithic now hovered with the phrase, "This was our first apology." Another, a broken mirror. Caption, "We looked and kept looking." Staff attempted to reset the archive. The system refused. Security logs showed no breach. Only a quiet sequence blinking beneath the root. Let memory bloom. The Council held its final emergency meeting regarding Earth. No one recorded the session. It was said the Chancellor herself began to hum during the address, a soft tune unfamiliar to any known species, yet instantly understood. Afterward, she locked herself in her chambers and did not speak for 13 cycles. That was the last formal act of galactic policy regarding Earth. The probes were never mentioned again, but those who had seen, those who had heard, they remembered. Not data, not signals, feelings, warmth, loss, hope, regret. They remembered without choosing to, and that was the weapon. Not harm, not force, remembrance. Earth's defense was not armor or fire, it was story, and story could not be shot down. By the time the Council realized this, the galaxy had already changed. The stars now carried old songs in their flickers, and when the quiet came, it was never empty again. It was echo, it was warning, it was memory, it was Earth. It began without fire. The warlord system of Targasa, long known for its raids on unaligned frontier worlds, went dark. No energy spikes, no troop movements, no incoming transmissions, just a slow unraveling of control. Satellites fell from orbit without resistance, not shot down, not sabotaged. They simply lost guidance and drifted into decay. Targassan Command scrambled fleets to investigate orbital losses, fearing internal sabotage. Their cruisers reached high atmosphere and returned blind. Navigation systems erased, planetary markers unrecognized. What they saw instead of stars were symbols, drifting across the sky like constellations rewritten. Glyphs no species could identify, yet all who saw them instinctively understood. Regret. A day later, the obelisk appeared. No ship delivered it. No structure moved to make way. It simply stood, 12 meters tall, impossibly smooth, planted in the central plaza of Targasa's capital city. An obelisk, Earth-style, cut from basalt-like matter not found anywhere in their system. No alarms had triggered, no breach detected. But every citizen awoke knowing it was there. Its surface shimmered with Terran language, translated instantly by the minds of those who approached. It read, "You mourned none of what you destroyed, so we mourn for you." Around it, silence fell like snow. No birds, no engines, no wind. Just the sound of people realizing something had ended, though none could name it. Military command tried to secure the plaza. Drone troopers advanced, weapons primed. None fired. Some knelt. Some turned and fled. One unit dropped their arms entirely and began building a ring of candles around the obelisk. Where they'd gotten candles, no one knew. Targasa hadn't used firelight in a century. By midday, half the capital stood watching. No broadcasts had summoned them. No announcements were made. They simply came, drawn, as if pulled by something older than memory, deeper than language. General Arveth, commander of the Black Halberd regiments, arrived by hovercraft. Hardened by 30 years of conquest, she had executed planetary surrenders without blinking. She stepped into the plaza and stopped. There was a sound, not from the obelisk, but inside her. Something she hadn't heard in decades. Her own father's voice, reading a bedtime story. Earth's language. A language neither of them had known. She dropped to her knees and wept. Later she defected, abandoned her command, renounced her titles, walked into the civilian crowds and was never seen again. Targasa never recovered orbital control, but no further violence followed. The obelisk remained, and the plaza around it became a silent place of mourning. Not for Terrans, not for Targassans, but for something both had lost. Other systems took note. Military analysts tried to explain it. There's no payload, no electronic interference. The object isn't transmitting. But the funerals began anyway. One by one, worlds that had traded in blood, oppressors, raiders, warmongers, found obelisks in their capitals. Never placed, just present. And each one bore a different phrase. On Krillin, you taught your children war. Now they teach your ghosts. On Baravash, what is left when conquest forgets to build? On Talvorun, we grieve the future you denied yourselves. The phrases spread faster than fear. Entire planetary networks began recording obelisk inscriptions as scripture. A new subdiscipline of exoanthropology formed overnight. Thanatos linguistics, the study of messages written for those already lost. But Earth never claimed responsibility. No ships identified, no signals tracked. And yet the pattern was unmistakable. Worlds with violent histories, especially those involved in past Terran exploitation, were visited, not by fleets, but by memory. The obelisks carried no weapons, but they did something worse. They made those who read them remember, and in remembering, they unraveled. Governments fell, not by revolution, but by mass resignation. Whole units of soldiers laid down arms, claiming they could hear funeral music no one else could. In the quiet, some reported seeing figures, translucent, human-like, standing beside the obelisks, not threatening, just present, mourning. One video surfaced briefly before being scrubbed from every network. A child on Targasa approached the obelisk, held its base, said in perfect Old Earth English, "We forgive you," then vanished into light. No one knew her, no record, no DNA match, just a goodbye. Even those far from Earth's history felt its weight. On the mining moons of Veldrock, children began building miniature obelisks out of discarded tools. No instruction, just instinct. A veteran mercenary captain turned herself in for war crimes no one had charged her with. Across the galaxy, funerals were held not for the dead, but for memory itself. Some lit candles, others sang lullabies they couldn't possibly have known. And everywhere the same quiet truth settled like dust. Earth had sent no army, no ultimatum, no declaration of vengeance, only reminders of what had been forgotten, of grief ignored, of pain left unburied. Their offense was not destruction, it was mourning. Mourning so deep, so ancient, so true, it echoed louder than weapons. And in that echo, even the powerful trembled. The council met again in closed session. They didn't speak of retaliation. They didn't speak of containment. There was only one question now. If this is how they mourn, what happens when they choose to remember joy? Earth remained silent, but its silence was no longer empty. It was presence, it was reckoning, it was the first funeral, and it would not be the last. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. No emissaries shouted, no delegates blinked translations across the walls. Even the translation systems themselves seemed to hesitate, pausing, buffering as if uncertain whether to carry these words forward into history. The obelisks had changed everything, not because they killed, not because they destroyed, but because they made the council feel. And now the galaxy's highest chamber trembled beneath the weight of its own doubt. Chancellor Sorovan of the Ekrid Accord stood at the center of the sphere. Her voice was smooth, clipped, and strained beneath formality. We face a world that does not speak, yet makes all others silent. We face a people long thought scattered, who now return not as conquerors, but as consequence. The chamber screens behind her showed rotating worlds, Targasa, Krillon, Tal Varun, each marked by a single glowing point, an obelisk. The ambassadors of 300 species sat in uneasy silence. Delegate Varn of the Sith Commonwealth broke it first. His tone, sharp as razors, carried fear barely veiled. They do not attack, and yet systems fall. Their presence rewrites memory. That is a weapon. But a weapon of truth, countered Nijal of the Thalians. We have long ignored the pain our civilizations inflicted. Now it merely returns. This is not about guilt, snapped Varn. It's about survival. Survival of what? Came a voice from the upper ring, faint, ancient. High Archivist Daelor had not spoken in a century. Of our self-image, he continued. Because if that's the threat, then Earth has already won. Silence again. Then the whispers began. Not spoken aloud, but over private links, through closed synapses and hidden channels. Some had begun dreaming. Delegates from entirely separate species shared notes, quietly, without explanation. They dreamed of Earth, not the blue sphere orbiting a yellow sun, but something else. A great cradle, a slow heartbeat, a fire-lit cave beneath starlight, a child reaching out. Each vision unique, each vision the same. Earth as it remembered itself, and remembering those who forgot it. Fear bloomed in the cracks. Security protocols tightened around the debate. Psych profilers were summoned. Half the council began wearing signal filters in their collars, worried that memory might now be contagious. A new term entered the lexicon: remembrance drift. Faction lines formed overnight. One bloc, hard-lined and pragmatic, called for a containment perimeter, a full technological quarantine of Seoul. It was led by Varn and bolstered by the military powers. The other, smaller but growing, called themselves the Curious. They argued that fear of Earth was rooted in guilt, and that the only way forward was understanding. At the center, the Chancellor weighed both sides. She herself had begun dreaming. A young girl with Terran eyes had spoken her name. Not her title, her birth name, one she'd buried long ago. The girl had asked a question. "Do you remember why you left home?" She woke crying. Now she faced the vote. Across the chamber, hands hovered above sigils. Some shook, some were still. A preemptive strike on Earth. Not to destroy, no one dared say that aloud, but to confront, to probe the silence with force, to push just enough and see what pushed back. The formal motion, directive prime mirror, to engage the Terran anomaly. Debate time, waived. Opposition, logged, not heard. The vote proceeded. One by one, the sigils flared. Yes, yes. Abstain. Number. Yes. Number in the background, an assistant collapsed. Eyes open, humming a lullaby. Medical teams did not interrupt the vote. When the final tally blinked into existence, a hush fell over the hall. By 2 votes, the motion passed. Earth would be confronted. No cheers, no gavel. Only breath held in dread. The Chancellor nodded once, then turned to the sealed envoy command. "Begin preparations. Quietly. Do not announce intent until movement is underway." A whisper followed her command, but it did not come from the council. It came from the walls, from the stone. 3 words heard only by those who had voted yes. "We are listening." Later reports would say it was a hallucination, residual effects from mimetic exposure. But several delegates resigned the same hour. One, a respected general from the Tharn Imperium, stepped out of his robes and wept before the chamber's eternal flame. He left behind a note. "I heard my mother's voice. She's been dead 200 years. Directive Prime Mirror moved forward. Covert fleets assembled in the quiet edges of space. No battle plans were drawn, only contact contingencies. Still, weapons were charged. Still, defenses were aligned. As if they knew the confrontation would not be physical. Ships were shielded against signal, dream, sound, memory, and myth. As if that would matter. Among the curious bloc, something else stirred. A theory. That Earth was not retaliating. That it was grieving. And grief, unshared, becomes danger. They begged for restraint, for one emissary to be sent in peace. But no one would volunteer. No one would go near. One voice spoke up. Not a delegate. A child. An orphan from the war-torn colony of Vixara, watching the council feed from a shelter. She pointed to the screen and said simply, "They're sad, not angry." The feed cut to black, and the fleets continued toward Earth. The council watched in silence, not out of discipline, but fear. The vote had passed. Earth would be touched, and nothing that is remembered can ever be forgotten. The fleets moved in silence. Not tactical silence, not the careful encryption of war, but the absence of speech itself. Officers barked no orders. Crews moved through their routines like phantoms. It wasn't discipline, it was reverence, or something close to fear. Earth hung ahead of them, quiet and unimposing. No planetary defenses, no fleet stationed in orbit, no warning signals, just clouds and water and soil and sky, as it had always been. And yet the ships began to fracture before they even reached lunar range. Temporal anomalies were the first sign. Minor at first, time loops in navigational logs, bridge clocks ticking backward, a heartbeat that stuttered and then resumed 20 seconds prior, making crew doubt they'd ever heard it stop. Then it deepened. A lieutenant aboard the Threxian dreadnought Iron Veil reported a memory of being a violinist in 18th century Austria. He had never seen a violin in his life. He had never even heard of Austria. But he described with perfect clarity the wood grain of his instrument, the chill of candlelight concerts, the way his fingers had bled during winter performances. Elsewhere, a Vakari weapons officer recalled being a nurse in the Syrian civil war, bandaging children, screaming in a language her species had no vocal range for. The fleet's medical AIs flagged mass neurological hallucination. The admiral of the Seoul Approach Task Force, Irina Kef, convened a private line to all ships. Her voice was slow, measured. We are not hallucinating. We are remembering things we never lived. No one argued. Sensors failed to function in real time. Data returned before pings were sent. Readouts looped in recursive spirals, ending in centuries-old Earth images. Hiroshima's ruins, a black man holding a protest sign in Alabama, the empty boots of fallen soldiers in Normandy. Oh, now these weren't projections. They were memories, and not of the fleets, of Earth. Remembered so hard it bled into orbit. One fleet commander collapsed on his command dais, weeping. His aide tried to comfort him, only to hear the man speak in fluent Cherokee, recounting a massacre from 1836. He died 10 minutes later. Autopsy revealed a cardiovascular system he did not biologically possess. The crew of the orbiting science vessel, Lucent Wake, sent one final report. No data. Just a sentence. I see every war we justified. I see every face we forgot. They self-destructed seconds later. No order given. Aboard the battlecruiser Cal Dorath, time ceased completely. The ship hung frozen, static. The crew, however, remained conscious. In their own minds, days passed, then months. Some spoke of growing old aboard that ship. Some remembered burying each other. And when they were finally recovered, a flicker, a second, they returned changed. No one aboard would speak. They simply stared at Earth with recognition, as if they had been part of its story all along. The Council, still watching from across the stars, tried to cut the feed, but the signal returned, not as a warning, but a mirror. Hundreds of delegates saw their own faces reflected in Earth's oceans. Not as they were, as they could have been. A gentle hand extended, a child's drawing, a dinner table never reached, a future never claimed, and behind it all, the weight of absence, carried by the planet like a sacred wound. Ships began to turn away, captains unable to issue commands, engineers forgetting why they ever installed weapons, soldiers laying down arms with hands shaking from phantom guilt. Aboard the dreadnought Vespasian, one AI shut itself down voluntarily, stating in perfect Earth-accented English, "I remember Dresden." It had no programmed knowledge of Earth's history. The crew deleted the log. It returned 12 seconds later, etched into the walls of every cabin. "We have remembered you. Now you must do the same." Earth's first and only response. No voice, no vessel, no presence. Just memory, written in light and blood and silence. Entire species wept without knowing why. Planets began lighting candles. Billions, across hundreds of systems. Not for Earth, but for themselves. The fleet hung paralyzed above Earth. Weapons live, systems primed, and no one able or willing to press a button. Every death Earth had endured now lived inside the ones who came to threaten it. Not as punishment, as memory, and memory does not forget. Some tried to fight it. The 7th Battalion of the Harkin Stormborns activated full psychic shielding, standard protocol for exposure to anomalous cognition fields. It failed within 2 minutes. Not because the shields didn't hold, but because the battalion began dreaming in sync. A unified dream. Children playing on a cracked Terran street, rain falling on an old woman's hands, a young couple dancing to no music, beneath a sky filled with ash. They woke sobbing. They burned their own insignias and asked to be called mourners of the before. No command structure accepted the title, but their request was fulfilled nonetheless. The name passed like wildfire. Other divisions followed. On the 9th day, Earth changed its orbit slightly, only a quarter degree, and the stars realigned. Constellations warped, not in physical space, but in myth. Old legends began rewriting themselves. War gods lost their weapons in every depiction. Tales of ancient conquest turned into ballads of failure. The great hammer of Vordak, now a shepherd's cane. The teeth of Solkara, now mute, worn smooth by time. Even across digital records, art and history began to reflect loss, not victory, not erasure, memory reasserting itself. Galactic myth now bent around Earth's grief. Entire cultures paused, not because Earth had demanded it, because they needed to. Something had been returned to them, something they didn't know was missing, something like shame, something like love. And still, no message came. No ship launched from Earth. No human figure emerged, only that single line repeating now in a whisper across every known communication band. We have remembered you. Now you must do the same. One captain, unable to bear it, turned her vessel and ran. Her logs were recovered from a rogue buoy. I saw every species I betrayed, every deal I made, every child I ignored. I saw what I could have been. She ended with a question. If memory is this strong, what must forgiveness cost? The fleet never reached the surface. They hovered like mourners outside a door they had once slammed shut. Inside, Earth remained unchanged. A world, a memory, a wound that refused to rot. Some ships left gifts. In orbit, they launched old Terran artifacts. Books, tapes, instruments. A makeshift ring formed, a garland of apology. One ship released soil samples from lost colonies. Another, flowers from a world once bombed by Terran forces, offered back in reconciliation. Nothing was acknowledged. Nothing was refused. The field of memories grew, and Earth remained silent. But the silence was no longer passive. It was sacred. It was waiting. Galactic Command finally issued a cease and retreat order. The fleet obeyed. As they left orbit, the stars above them pulsed once, as if blinking, as if seen, not threatened, not condemned, just remembered. And memory, once awakened, does not sleep again. It began with a hesitation, not mechanical, human. The command was clear. Initiate the strike. Target parameters were locked, trajectories perfect, warheads pre-armed. But the Admiral's mouth wouldn't move. She stared at the control console, lips slightly parted, waiting for the word to rise. It never did. She wasn't interrupted. She wasn't stopped. She simply forgot how to say, fire. A moment later, her second-in-command stood and walked quietly out of the command chamber. Not in protest, not in panic, as though pulled by something ancient. He was later found in his quarters, scrawling poetry in Terran glyphs. The glyphs were perfect, though he had never studied Earth languages. His words were later translated. They read, "We came with flame, but found only ash, and the echo of our own breath." The rest of the fleet waited, weapons charged, AI targeting arrays confirmed, but nothing moved. Not a single shot left orbit, because the systems too had stopped responding. Not failed, refused. The flagship AI, upon inquiry, issued a single line before shutting itself off. Do not interrupt the funeral. Across the fleet, crew members found themselves unable to remember their orders. One commander gave instructions. No one moved. He repeated them louder. Still, no response. His crew stared at him with tear-filled eyes. Not defiance, grief. They knew something he didn't. And then he knew it too. They weren't here to end Earth. They were guests at its ceremony. Earth had not asked for them, but it had prepared for them nonetheless. Not with shields or guns or countermeasures, but with memory, with truth. The skies above the blue planet shimmered with slow pulses of light, invisible to instruments, yet visible to the soul. Each flicker bore a story. On board one cruiser, a technician collapsed, whispering the name of a lover they had never met, from a life that had never been theirs. Another saw a battlefield, not one from their history, but from Earth's. Mud and trenches and broken gas masks, a hand clutching a locket, a boy no older than 17 humming through shattered lungs. What Earth offered wasn't pain, it was witness, and it was too much to bear. On Council Network Prime, rogue transmissions began to leak. No point of origin, no traceable code, just voices, thousands, from thousands of worlds, telling stories, confessions, regrets, apologies. The eulogies poured in. A ruler of a once bloodthirsty war tribe begged forgiveness in song. An assassin who'd ended peace negotiations centuries earlier submitted a recording of their last dream. Children on a Terran swing set, inviting him to sit. A machine race, long thought incapable of emotion, uploaded a visual poem in Earth-sold binary, showing a cracked photograph inside an abandoned satellite. One line kept appearing beneath each broadcast. Earth is not burying itself. Earth is burying what we let ourselves become. No council records authorized these transmissions. No firewall stopped them. Truth had become viral. The commanders tried to regain control. Protocol overrides were issued, manual control engaged, fail-safes unlocked. But every button, every switch, every mechanism slowed. Hands trembled, eyes blurred. Some saw their own faces reflected in control panels, but aged, tired, holding regret that had no timeline. One pilot abandoned his seat mid-maneuver and walked to the observation deck. He pressed his forehead against the glass, watching Earth revolve. He whispered a line none had taught him. "We don't mourn stars, but maybe we should." Others followed. The bridges of warships emptied. Strike teams dissolved into silent circles, reciting verses that hadn't existed until they spoke them. In one corner of the flagship, an AI began painting. No one programmed it to, but still it rendered oil upon synthetic canvas, a field of gravestones under twilight. Each stone bore no name, only silence. Back on Earth, the planet did not acknowledge the ritual. No lights flared, no words sent. It continued its stillness. But the fleets orbiting it knew. They were no longer warriors. They were attendees. The funeral was not for Earth. It was for the empire that had sent them, and they were its final witnesses. In the Great Hall of the Council, silence fell heavier than ever before. Delegates tuned to the unapproved transmissions, some in shame, others in awe. Screens flickered with images of lives never lived, of wounds never closed, of peace never pursued. The Speaker of War stepped down from her dais. She dropped her medallion on the floor and walked out without a word. Outside the chamber, memorial candles burned in gravity-free glass orbs. Who lit them? No one knew, but they drifted now across 10,000 systems. On the outer rim, oppressed species began dismantling their prisons, not through uprising, but through realization. "The empire is not fallen," said one child into a live broadcast. "It was never real. It was a story we were told to forget who we are." The fleet, still circling Earth, received a final signal. It did not come from the planet. It came from within their own ships, from their own hands. The message was carved, burned, whispered, or etched, without intention, yet everywhere. Do not fear silence. It is how truth sounds when we listen. No explosion marked the end. No catastrophic error. No system breach. The empire simply stopped. Its institutions forgot what they were for. Its generals found themselves unable to plan. Its archives rewrote themselves, replacing conquest logs with names. Names that had been missing from memory for centuries. Names of the dead. Names of the silenced. Earth had offered no fire, but the truth had burned everything anyway. And still, no retaliation came. No threats. Just gravity. Just orbit. Just silence that felt more sacred than any anthem ever sung. The fleet began disbanding, not by order, by consent. Ships left formation. Some drifted toward deep space seeking pilgrimage. Some returned home, leaving empty thrones behind them. Some never left at all, choosing to remain above Earth, to float, to remember. A new name began to circulate in the void. Not empire, not council, not victory, but witness. A single role, a shared task. To hold memory, to live better, to mourn forward. On Earth, nothing changed. It didn't need to. The obelisks stopped appearing. not because they were no longer needed, but because now they were being built by others. On planets that had never known Terran soil, black stones began to rise, not as threats, as apologies. Each bore the same engraving. We came with fire, but truth asked for flame. The funeral ended. No death, no final act. Just the quiet recognition that something was over, and something new could now begin. Not because Earth demanded it, but because the galaxy could no longer lie to itself. And in the space between what was said and what was done, there was room to grow. Truth had won, not with war, but with memory that refused to die. They called it the last broadcast. It arrived without coordinates, without origin signature, without flair. No beam of energy, no cryptographic chain, just presence. Every species heard it simultaneously in their own mother tongue. Even those whose languages had been dead for millennia, even those who no longer had ears. It was not sound, it was understanding. Words without vibration, a voice made of memory. The message was short. We are not your end. We are your mirror. The transmission ended, but the silence that followed was not the same silence as before. Planets stopped, not in motion, in momentum. Markets froze. Governments hesitated. War protocols unarmed themselves. A diplomat from the Vitari Republic wept openly on a public channel, asking forgiveness from no one in particular, only repeating, "We forgot the shape of love." The Jareth Consortium's high priesthood burned their own war scrolls and opened the Skyglass Vault, a Terran telescope kept as a trophy, now facing the stars again. The great ship cities of the Talayan closed their plasma doors and began teaching children the extinct languages the message had come in, just in case memory required a home. No threat had been issued, no force used, but the galaxy changed, because Earth had stopped asking to be seen and had forced them to see themselves. The Council, what remained of it, tried to respond. But the chamber was empty, not by force, by absence. One by one, delegates had left, not together, not by agreement. They simply walked out. Some returned to their homeworlds. Others disappeared into the quiet corners of the galaxy. Monks in exile, or penitents seeking silence. A few left messages behind. I was never meant to lead. My voice drowned out the ones that mattered. I heard my child's laughter in the broadcast. He died 40 years ago. No alarms rang. No coups erupted. Just dissolution, not collapse, not revolution, evaporation. Power had lost its center, and without memory to justify it, it had nothing to anchor to. 1,000 systems went quiet, not dead, reflective. The lights stayed on. The cities still buzzed, but voices changed. Music softened. Architecture shifted. Every world looked inward, not in fear of invasion, but in fear of recognition. The kind of fear born from finally understanding who you could have been. On the desert moon of Hyraxis, a crowd gathered in the dunes to stare at the stars. They held mirrors to the sky, not to see themselves, but to show themselves what the sky saw. On Kolvesh, a race of conquerors painted murals of Terran lullabies, though none had ever heard the melodies. In the archive planet of Morn, where every war crime was catalogued, a door opened that had been locked for 5,000 years. Inside, a single Terran globe, untouched, waiting. The message was studied by every intelligence system in the quadrant. No pattern, no encryption, just 5 words, but it changed everything. We are not your end, we are your mirror. Philosophers took it literally. What does a mirror do? It reflects, yes, but it also inverts. It shows what you don't normally see. Your own gaze caught from the outside, and the galaxy had been forced to see itself. Not in glory, not in conquest, but in consequence. Some systems tried to erase the message. They purged their archives, burned memory crystals, hacked their own cognitive networks. It didn't matter. The words kept returning, not from outside, from within, scrawled into notebook margins, whispered by children, encoded in random weather patterns. The stars, it seemed, remembered too. Every night sky across 10,000 worlds now looked, Wrong. Constellations shifted. Not physically, perceptually. The heroes of legend now pointed to graves. The myths of old glory now read like epitaphs. Some blamed Earth, but they said it quietly. No one wanted to speak too loudly beneath the orbit of judgment, because judgment had not come in fire. It had come in remembrance. And in that kind of silence, every whisper felt like a confession. Every breath felt like history. The ships that once ringed Earth were mostly gone now, but a few remained. Not as guardians, as pilgrims. They orbited the planet like satellites of humility. They kept no weapons active. Their lights were dimmed, their sensors turned inward. One pilot described the experience. When you look at Earth long enough, it looks back. And when it looks back, you remember who you were supposed to be. The phrase spread. Pilots began etching it into their hulls. Caravans of refugees heading into deep space carried it as prayer. Entire species adopted it as right. Children would spend one night staring at a star map of Earth, not to learn astronomy, but to learn memory. On the mining moons of Zephal, workers built a shrine with no deity. Only that phrase in every language known and lost. You remember who you were supposed to be? Earth did not respond. Earth did not blink. It remained a planet. Blue, clouded, quiet, but no longer mocked. No longer erased. Now it was legend. The great wars stopped, not because they were ended, because they were remembered. And memory, once sacred, has no appetite for repetition. The orbit of judgment became a term not for Earth, but for the moment every civilization must pass through. The moment of self-awareness, when conquest becomes mourning, and mourning becomes change. The council was never rebuilt. There were attempts, frameworks proposed, treaties drafted. But every time someone would ask, what would Earth say? And the paper would burn metaphorically, or sometimes literally, because now every voice carried the memory of silence, and silence had become the highest form of respect. The empires that once prided themselves on strength began building monuments, not to generals, but to teachers. The warrior clans turned their training halls into libraries. The spy networks began teaching poetry. The pirates planted orchards on asteroid belts, leaving them unclaimed. It wasn't utopia, but it was motion. Motion towards something remembered if never lived. And at the center of it all, Earth remained unchanged. From orbit, it looked the same as it always had, green and blue and swirling with storms. But no one looked too long, because if you did, the mirror opened. And it didn't show you Earth, it showed you yourself. Not as you were, not even as you are, but as you could have been had you never turned away. And that was the judgment, not death, not punishment, but the inescapable truth that your own memory is the sentence, that to live without facing who you were supposed to be is its own kind of extinction. And to remember, truly remember, is to begin again. The message was never repeated. It didn't have to be. It lived now in the way people walked, the way leaders paused before speaking, the way architects redesigned windows to face east, toward Earth. On the prison moon of Valarix 9, where songs had been banned for generations, a guard hummed a lullaby one night without knowing the tune. Within a month, every inmate knew the words. No one taught them. On the trade world of Basalian, where art was once currency, people began painting only in grayscale, not out of mourning, but reverence. Color, they said, would return when they remembered how to use it without forgetting others. A small station called Dusta 4 drifted in a dead system, forgotten by most. One day, its sole occupant transmitted a line. I remember a woman who lived on Earth and never spoke a cruel word. I do not know her name, but I remember her. The broadcast was not archived, but everyone heard it, and everyone knew who she was, even if she had never lived. Because that now was Earth's legacy, not dominance, not revenge, a galaxy seated with the possibility of better memory, a warning made not of threat, but reflection. And somewhere in a classroom on a distant world, a child raised her hand and asked the question that would echo for centuries. Will Earth ever speak again? And her teacher, an old soldier who had once aimed missiles at the blue planet, smiled and said, I hope not. Why? Because if it does, it means we forgot again. At the edge of the Orion Gate, a wandering archivist carved the last known monument of the era. It was simple. A black obelisk untouched by ornament or metal, just a polished stone in a field of silence. On its surface, only 3 lines. We listened. We remembered. We did not fire. The monument was never vandalized. Even pirates left offerings. Even scavengers whispered prayers. And when meteors struck it, the stone held, not by strength, but by recognition. It was no longer just history, it was identity, not of Earth, of everyone. Because in the end, Earth had not brought judgment. It had offered memory. It had held up a mirror. And in doing so, it gave the galaxy a chance to become what it should have been all along. The orbit of judgment remained, not around a planet, but around every heart. And whenever the stars flickered strangely, whenever a child sang an unknown melody, whenever a warlord hesitated, hand trembling over a launch key, they would look skyward. They would see Earth, and they would remember, not the fear, not the silence, but the echo of who they once dreamed of being. And sometimes, if you watch long enough, you could almost see the planet blink, as if, just for a second, it was watching you too.